Alright guys, welcome back to another Dragon Ball Legends video. Today we're going to be making our tier list for part 1 of Legends Fest. We have been playing quite a bit since Legends Fest has started, playing a lot of off camera, a lot of on camera. So we do have a good standing on what kind of the meta is right now. We're currently standing in like top 100 on the leaderboards, and we just have been playing a lot. We are going to be considering everything at 14 star for this tier list, and we will be considering them on their best teams as well as which teams they can be leader slotted on. With that being said, if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get into it. So to begin with, let's start off with the hot take for this one. Let's go ahead and start off with the hot take. We have 1 and 2. We are going to talk about Mr. Vegito Blue and also Ultra Majin Vegeta. Now, you could definitely make the argument that Majin Vegeta is still better than Vegito Blue. However, in my experience so far, from all the matches I've done and everything, I think that Vegito Blue has some of the most insane offense that we've ever seen in the game. The ability that he has to completely negate any sort of retaliation from your enemy makes it very easy to deal with Majin Vegeta, UG4, Turles, like any character that you can think of that has any sort of gimmick where they reduce your ki, destroy your cards, have a gauge, have a counter, none of that. It just does not matter. And Vegito Blue having level 2 card draw speed on top of that, basically infinite ki with his cost reduction as well as his ki per card, and all these other things that he does have, extra cards on green, refreshing his combo break on green, the damage inflicted, the stacking, like, it is ridiculous the amount of things this guy does while being a decently tanky unit. This guy has neutral on the first hit, a shit ton of healing, both on main, double vanish restore, so much neutral pressure with blast armor green, blast armor blue, blast armor strike, time stop with his main, vanish restore with his main on first and second transformation. Like, he has so many things that he can do, to the point where I do think that he is currently number 1 for me. Now, that is not to say that Majin Vegeta cannot be argued at 1. That is why we do have them as 1 and 2. Because Majin Vegeta is still, like, when I'm fighting him, when I'm using him, his ability to snipe characters is still insane. I have had my Vegito get sniped by Majin Vegeta once so far in all the matches I've done, but I could definitely see that happen a lot more. It's not something that's hard to do. Majin Vegeta is still a phenomenal unit. He does get his buff canceled by Vegito Blue, and Vegito Blue is tanky, so he might live it sometimes. But a lot of the times, you can just set up a snipe with MV and get rid of Vegito Blue, which will be something that you want to do because that will make the match a lot easier for you to deal with. But that is going to be the 1 and 2. Now, moving on to 3, honestly, moving on to 3, we're gonna do something a little controversial here as well. We're gonna say 3 and 4, and we're gonna have Mr. Gotenks and Mr. Turles at 3 and 4. Now, initially when I was making this, I was thinking of just putting Turles at 3 and just having him be there by himself. But the more games I've done, the more I've realized that, yeah, Turles is very good and he has a lot of utility and a lot of everything, but Gotenks is almost right there with him, man. Gotenks has neutral, Gotenks has disruption, Gotenks has a lot of staying power, Gotenks has amazing support, amazing damage, amazing combo potential, amazing extending and switching out into other characters such as Vegito Blue. He has amazing color synergy as well. He has red by himself to counter characters like Majin Vegeta, Triku, Rose, right? And then on top of that, he has neutral against characters like Turles that are trying to kill him for a majority of the match, while covering, you know, Vegito Blue. And those are all things that work very well with Gotenks, to the point where I feel like you can't argue him as better than Turles in the current meta, or at least on par with him. And the reason I also say that is because Turles, now that Vegito Blue is in the game, and we have a very solid green option that does damage, and just straight up does not give a damn, Turles is not that big of a threat no more. Like, Turles is still very good, but Turles is actually manageable now because Vegito Blue exists. Vegito Blue will go in there, he will go ahead and shred your Turles. He won't give a damn about his ki reduction or anything like that. He doesn't care about the card destruction. Turles doesn't have too much cost reduction to impact Vegito Blue. So he kind of just goes in there, slaps him around, especially his first life. His first life, he doesn't have as much neutral either. Once he transforms, obviously, he gets some neutral. But because his first life, he doesn't have any neutral, makes it very easy to get through that first life and then actually rush his team. And that's another thing that Gotenks is very good at doing. He pops main, gets endurance nullification, and can just press Rising Rush. Depending on your situation, that is also very useful to do. So that is why I have started to lean towards 3 and 4 being arguable between Turles and Gotenks and who's better. I might even personally, for me, say that Gotenks might just move up here. But I'm on the fence. They're very close to each other. So at 3 and 4, we're going to have Turles and Gotenks holding down the spot. Now, moving on to 4, 5, and 6, this is where I think we're going to have another controversial take. At number 4, we are going to go ahead and still have Triku holding it down. Now, Triku, a lot of people have seen starting to underrate him quite a bit, but honestly, I'm going to say it right now. I think that Triku does what the new Rose wants to do, but just better. The fact that Triku on bench, while your team is taking the hits, which your teams are capable of doing, right? All the current teams are pretty decently tanky. They're not going to get melted through. And Triku is just kind of sitting there on bench. He's giving you the support. He comes in, he's destroying cards, he's doing the disruption, he's canceling buff effects on ultimates while he's on the bench. He's healing a lot. He has green card, he has neutral, he has vanish restore to stay on the field. He has blast armor. He has a lot of different things. His green card extended. He's very good at coming onto the field, extending combos. Unlike Rose, who needs to get hit to get a lot of his damage out, and also needs to reset his gauge, which he doesn't really make an easy job doing. To be fair, either Rose's gauge is pretty hard to reset, and even the buffs that he gets when you reset his gauge aren't too great. The buffs that he gets for his enhanced moves on his moves are also not too great. So I am going to say that Triku is still just holding down that number 4 spot, and he's still in there. But I think the controversial take here is going to be, I will say Mai is probably currently top 5. I do genuinely think that Mai currently is top 5. Mai is some of the most insane stuff we've seen out of a 1% unit in a very, very long time, especially with the boost on her right now. She has a very solid amount of HP. The setup I'm currently running her on, she's at like 3.6 million HP, which is insane for just a Mai unit. And on top of that, her having this endurance snow for coming in is so insanely powerful. It can make it to where you are very easily sniping some of these endurance characters like Majin, Vegito, Rose, Gotenks. Makes it very easy to snipe them. In other cases, also makes it very easy to rush them. She also has very, very solid blast output from her blast cards as well. And on top of that, she's giving a very great amount of support. She's giving 15% passively, another 15 on switch out. She's giving you an infinite heal on switch out. She's healing herself on coming in as well as switching out as well. She has type neutral on main. She has very solid damage on her ult. She has endurance null, and like she has all these different things. She gives a card on switch out as well. Synergizes perfectly with BB. She's generating green cards, which is also very good for almost all of her teams, including BB. And I feel like she overall just so much. You really, I genuinely do feel like she is a top 5 unit right now. I initially had her in the lower top 10s when I was doing like my initial like tier list making. But the more I've used her, the more I've fought her, it's just like she feels like she can argue at that top 5 spot. I don't think there's like a massive gap between like the 5 and the 6, 7, 8 or anything. But I do think that it is a pretty clear that she is holding down that 5th spot. Now, I was debating whether I want to put Rose just straight up under them and put him at 6, but I'll say you could argue him in this realm because he is about the same unit as them. But honestly, to me, I do feel like Rose is more so here, but I can also see him more so in this conversation with these units. So I'll say these guys are all pretty relative to each other. You're going to have 4, 5, and 6 together, and Rose, for me, is going to be at the bottom of it. He's going to be at the 6th spot, and he is, I mean, what do we say about Rose, man? Like, I have so many issues with Rose. One issue that I have with Rose is that he has 50% healing when he enters the battlefield. It is limited to 3 times. Activation counts are shared both between his pre and his post, but if you're full HP, the activation still counts. So no matter what, when you come in with Rose, one of those heals will get wasted, which is stupid. It's just bad design. It's just blatant bad design. That should not be a thing. It should have been probably a 10% infinite heal, very similar to the unit that it seems like Rose was based off of, which is LF Super Baby 2. It should have just been like 10% heal every time he comes in. Other than that, his gauge is very annoying to reset because unlike Super Baby 2, this guy does not force draw any blue cards. He doesn't force draw any sort of card that resets his gauge. He doesn't get rid of your vanish to make it very easy to pop that such card to reset his gauge. And he really just makes you earn that gauge reset, and it just feels very annoying to use in play, and a lot of the characters just kind of don't care about his gauge either. All his gauge does is like minus 50 key and destroy 2 cards. Most characters can have that happen to them and still be able to draw more cards, heal more. It'll shorten their combo, yeah, probably, depending on who you're fighting. Vegito Blue literally came out with a mechanic that said nuh-uh to that entire gauge, so that was pretty cool. Even the healing from it, there's a lot of health restore debuffs that are currently going around. So there's a lot of different things that really do screw over Rose's gauge. And The other thing too is Rosé's personal damage is not the greatest, right? He's meant to be a defense unit, which is understandable, but I don't believe he's providing the defensive value that he should, given the units that are currently around. I feel like Triku provides a similar defense value, but in my opinion, more. Turles, obviously, he's not competing with Majin Vegeta. He's not competing with, and he's not competing with them offensively either, right? Offensively, you would have to probably tap this guy like 5,000 times just for him to compete offensively with these guys. And the thing about that just is it doesn't feel good. A unit who gets buffs for being hit, unless he has some sort of way to actually get priority, like if you remove Vanish when his gauge popped, you know, very similar to the unit that he's based off of, Super Baby 2, then that would have felt very good on him. But unfortunately, he does not have that. I do see myself by the end of part 2 probably moving him down to even lower, and I think he's going to be seeing a significant fall off post-fest and maybe a comeback eventually if he gets a plat, but I do think there is a very clear gap between him and Vegito Blue to me, which feels very similar to the kind of gap we saw between God Goku and Ultimate Gohan. Obviously not to the extent that Rosé is not a top 10 unit and he's as bad as God Goku was on release, but there is a very, 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 very clear and massive gap between the design choices that went into Vegito Blue and the design choices that went into Super Saiyan Rosé Goku Black. With that, we are going to be moving on from number 6, and let's go ahead and go to 7 and 8 here. And 7 and 8 also very, very probably controversial. Some people have written these units off, but it's going to be Mr. G4 and Mr. Ultimate Gohan, if we can find him. So both of these units, right? Let's get the obvious out of the way. They're both purple units. There's 3 yellow units that are in the meta, and those 3 units do a pretty good job at stopping these units. However, both of these purple units have very good value now that they have the ability to snipe Mr. Vegito Blue up there. Ulton can just combo drop and pop that main if he catches him on a sidestep, or if he catches him after his sidestep and then he can't get out of it. He has a very easy avenue to go ahead and snipe Vegito Blue with that, which a lot of people are doing. G4 also has a similar thing where if you sidestep a Vegito Blue attack, you can go to switch to G4, pop main, pop green card, pop ult, he's dead. Those are both very good snipe potentials on Vegito Blue that are good to have. In addition to that, the thing that makes these units a lot better right now than they were a couple patches ago, or a couple releases ago, would be that there is red units that are present in the meta that can help to deal with these guys. You have Mai, who you can run Mai with Gohan, and that's something that you could do. You could do Mai, Gohan, Vegito Blue, and that could be a pretty solid setup you could do as well. Or you could do G4, Gotenks, and Vegito Blue, which is also a very solid fusion setup. Probably the best fusion setup currently, right now, is to run G4, Vegito Blue, and Gotenks. And the reason for that is you have Vegito Blue, who's going to deal with other gauge mechanics as well as Turles for you. You have Gotenks, who can deal with MB, who can rush, and who can do all these other things, and also give you some defense. And then you have G4, who's going to be sniping other people's Vegito Blue. He's going to be dealing with Turles. He's going to be fighting with the defensive gauge. He's going to be doing Dragon Ball destruction. He's going to be denying rushes. And those are all just things that synergize very well. So these 2 units, yeah, they're purple. Yeah, they're going to struggle because these yellow units are on the meta. But it's a 3v3 game, guys. It's a 3v3 game, and they have units that work with them to help them be effective in the meta. Other units cannot say the same for them. And honestly, if part 2 is helping these units out even more, they're going to be moving above this Rosé very, very easily, or this Rosé is going to be moving down very easily. If part 3, we see an Ultra Forku who is red and is really shutting down this MV, this G4 is going to be making it back into the top 5 probably, because he's still a very, very phenomenal unit. He is just heavily, heavily, heavily countered by a lot of these units that are coming out right now, but slowly but surely, those units are getting units that are keeping them in check, and that's why this guy is starting to make his comeback. Moving on. So moving on to the final part, which will be the number 9 and 10 slot, we are going to have Mr. Omega Shenron probably creep up in there. We did go ahead and take Shin off the list because Shin now kind of just gets replaced by Mai on the setups that he was on. So Shin kind of just doesn't really serve a purpose. You still can use him. He will make it to the honorable mention list, but that is something that is existing for Shin. The last unit we're probably going to put on the list is going to be Mr. Fusing SV here. Now, Fusing SV initially, I had him a little higher on my list when I initially made it, but the more I've been playing, the more you kind of realize there is a lot of buff canceling going around, right? There's a lot of buff canceling. Vegito Blue very easily deals with this guy. MV very easily deals with this guy. Most of the other characters just have buff canceling to deal with him. They go neutral. So a lot of his impact with his guaranteed rush kind of gets negated through things such as those buff cancelings. It's still a good thing to have, get that damage in it. But honestly, we're moving away from that timer count meta, which is the main thing that was kind of keeping this fusing SV alive, was that timer count meta. But we're moving away from it, and now it's not as important to get as much damage. It's actually important to start killing some units, and that's kind of where this fusing SV is lacking, especially with this new green. A lot of these other defense tech units as well. The one unit he could snipe maybe being Go Tanks, just goes neutral, does not care. So that's why his value at anything has shot down. I initially did have him much higher when I made my initial showcase and my initial tier list and stuff, but I do have it moved down now because we are moving away from that timer count meta. Omega Shenron, he is making it into the top 10 here. He has some decent value with his indestructible and synergy and stuff like that. But Omega Shenron's on the last thread of his hope, really. He is going to be falling out very, very soon because he just quite literally does not do enough. He does have a task of trying to keep his team alive and stuff like that, but we're in a meta right now where people are keeping their team alive, and then they're also supporting and doing damage and doing all these other things, such as Majin Vegeta, Rose, Triku, Turles. All these units are doing exactly the same job that Omega wants to do, but also doing it better while doing something else. So that's kind of where we are at with Omega. He's on the lower end of his shelf life, but he's not written off just yet. He is still making it onto the bottom of the top 10, and Rose will soon be joining him there unless something changes. With that being said, I'm just going to move to the honorable mentions here. We did talk about him earlier. Shin will be making it onto the honorable mention list here. Outside of Shin, so let's talk about Mr. Celza. Celza is a very gimmick and niche unit. They have a seal that you can try to make work, and it'll try to help you, I guess. But they're not that great. I honestly don't even want to put them as an honorable mention, but you can make them work, and it is an option that you have. But if they're making it, then this guy's another cheese character you can kind of use with Celza. What you usually do is just, you seal a character, right? Then you get priority on somebody else who's Broly's neutral against, and then you can combo that character with Broly and not have to worry about anything because it's only two characters. That's been Broly's gimmick since he came out. If you get in a situation where they only have two characters, Broly's lock-in is just keeping them in there, and like that is a pretty solid combo. We have been running that a little bit ourselves as well. It is pretty saucy, pretty toxic, but it's also pretty saucy. That is going to be it for that. Another honorable mention is going to be Bardku. Bardku with their plat and these new units do synergize pretty well. You can run them with Rose. They do work pretty well with him. And also just a couple of the other units, Vegito Blue and stuff like that. You can run some pretty juicy type of setups where you can use that indestructible value. So that is an option that you have. Boo Duo are also still pretty decent if we can go ahead and find them. They do also can make the honorable mention. They're not the worst just yet, but they're not the greatest either. They are not the greatest either, but they're not bad. They are not bad. A couple other honorable mentions is going to be this Golden Frieza and Super 17. They also are pretty decent options right now that you can run. And they have some good setups that you could make work with them. That pretty much covers it. Honestly, most of these honorable mentions are still even copium. I would honestly just move away. Probably Broly, Celza, even these two, and it's kind of just Bardku, Shin, and Boo Duo that will kind of maintain that honorable mention spot down. The rest of these are kind of just whatever. This is pretty much the meta of Legends. You don't really see many other units outside of that. There's a couple people out there that are running like Ultra Vegito Blue on like a full Vegito Blue setup and stuff. But those aren't like, you know, meta teams or anything. There's still some people running Ultra Gohan. Some people are trying to run Booga still. But like a lot of these units have really just, they're past their time. They are past their time. And this is the new age of the Legends meta with Legends Fest that I'm currently experiencing, in my opinion, so far on what these units' impacts have been and what their impacts will be. Post-editing Aizen hopping back in here. We did go ahead and mess up the count right here. We're going to go ahead and fix that real quick. It was 5, 6, 7. I forgot that I initially had only one unit up here. That kind of threw me off. So it's 5, 6, 7 and 8, 9 here. And then we have the 10 spots going to Omega, moving SV down to the honorable mention. That is going to be going and fixing it. I might just leave it like that, and then these guys could be tied at 10, but we'll go ahead and do that, and that will be the final list. Going to go ahead and zoom it into it one more time. This will be the actual final list without the messed up count. This is boy Aizen, signing out once again.